We now move on to Leslie Kenny, who's a very good friend of mine. Just a bit of a background to her story. She's a CEO of Oxford Healthspan. It's an Oxford-based nutraceutical company focused on healthy aging. She has fundraised for several university spin-outs in the regenerative medicine and orphan drug space, and has also worked as a health coach. She has a BA from Berkeley and a Harvard MBA. What is remarkable is that she is a former patient and an autoimmune survivor who's managed to successfully reverse what she was told were incurable illnesses. Her passion towards healthy living is truly impressive, even by my clinical standards. And I've seen a lot of patients in my time. So hopefully her story and her take on nutraceuticals will be of much interest to our audience today. So over to you, Leslie.
Thanks very much, Paul, and good morning to everyone. I think it's really inspiring to see what Japan is doing under the leadership of Yoshimori Sensei and Ishido-san to commercialize this groundbreaking science, which of course Japan leads the world in. So, as you know from Paul, I'm Leslie Kenny, founder and CEO of Oxford Healthspan, and I'll just share my screen here. And I'm here today really to present to you a case study for how we can translate science into safe, effective products, and very quickly, but by going a less traditional commercialization route, which is that of nutraceuticals. Before I delve in, I would actually like to return to the question that Professor Noble opened with, which was, why should we slow aging? We've obviously heard from Professor Scott about the economic imperative to do so, but I also want to be here as a case study to you as an individual, as just a citizen and patient, because although I'm now 56, at age 39, which is the same age that my father died, I was told by my doctor that I had rheumatoid arthritis and lupus, and that the lupus was incurable. I was given a gigantic box of syringes filled with immunosuppressants and told that if I was lucky, I would have a good 5 years left because my body looked as if it was fighting cancer. I had sky-high cytokines, I had sky-high tumor necrosis factor alpha, my C-reactive protein numbers were going crazy. And if you think back to Dr. Kaufman's and Dr. Simon's, Professor Simon's presentations, I was experiencing premature aging or inflammaging. So with this word incurable, I knew there were no downsides to me trying things. So I essentially looked to biohack my health. I went on an anti-inflammatory diet, and I also tried an experimental therapy called, oh, gosh, I'm very sorry. You can't see my screen, is that right? I'm very sorry about that. Let me just share that screen with you. Hang on just a second. All right, let me go back.
It's up and running, thanks, Leslie.
Thank you, I'm so sorry about that. I'm just trying to get you back. So I was talking about the value of aging, of slowing aging. And in my own case, doing these rounds of intravenous immunoglobulin, going on an anti-inflammatory diet, I went back to test again with my doctor for lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, and all of my markers had plummeted. So I no longer had these diagnoses, nor did I have the symptoms. So I went from being incurable to simply being inexplicable. But what really happened was I brought my body back to homeostasis, and in the process, I had gone from a very biologically aged and diseased system to a biologically younger system with a longer health span. This then led to my ikigai, what the Japanese call your sense of purpose, and that was really to help regenerative medicine scientists bring their discoveries to market faster. I was helping them fundraise capital in order to bring products to market, but I was extraordinarily frustrated by this. The traditional routes to market are the pharmaceutical model or the orphan drug model. In pharmaceuticals, which Dr. Ishido knows well, you have potentially, a decade and a half of lab and clinical research. You spend hundreds, you spend millions of dollars on patents. It's very expensive and slow. Research and development, clinical safety trials can cost hundreds of millions of dollars. The orphan drug route, which some people are using to bring drugs to market that target rare orphan drugs, but have broader off-label applications and therefore greater commercial opportunities and revenue opportunities, has a much compressed timeline. The patent cost is still very high. You have the benefit of smaller clinical trial sizes. However, I have seen some very simple compounds that were just slightly modified. These compounds were available on the open market for, say, $50. After the very minor modification, then went back onto the market with patent protection for $800,000. So there is a cost to society of all of these things. And I will say that in my own case, I've calculated that I would have spent close to $1 million by now had I continued to stay on my immunosuppressants. So my frustration with the very long timeline of getting these discoveries like autophagy and spermidine to market led me to look at the nutraceutical option. Now, nutraceuticals are actually not very welcome commercially because they're not patent protected. They're food derived. And as we've seen from Dr. Kaufman's presentation, we actually create our own spermidine. 2/3 of our body's spermidine is produced in the gut biome and in our tissues. It's in all food. However, we know there are demonstrated health benefits and that the numbers actually wane as we get older. So there seemed to be no downside to going the nutraceutical route. In addition, nutraceuticals benefit from much lighter regulatory requirements because they're food and therefore being in the food supply for hundreds of years are considered safe. I like to think of this as what I call translational nutrition as opposed to translational medicine. I think nutrition has gotten a bit of a bad rap and that we tend to think that, that individuals are not capable of using nutrition as a way to modify their health span. I think that's a bit of a that's a bit of a patronizing statement to make. For the right compound via the right company, nutraceuticals can bring healthy aging compounds to consumers faster and cheaper. All right, so how do nutraceuticals actually stack up against other targets, other agents? And this chart, which I love, comes from Nature. Linda Partridge at University College London, Brian Kennedy and Matthias Fuente Alba put this together. I have added one extra diamond. So if you look at the top, you'll see spermidine is there. And you can also see things like metformin, NAD enhancers, that's another nutraceutical. So you've heard from Dr. Kaufman that spermidine does not seem to have any downsides. Our bodies actually produce it. So given the fact that this actually stacks up very well against other agents that promote healthy aging, I didn't see any reasons not to bring it to market. For me, I think it's very important that we think about pharmacy in the case of healthy diet being foundational, using then relevant nutraceuticals to augment where and when appropriate. So as Dr. Kaufman said, perhaps after the age of 40, or if you have premature aging, such as I did at the age of 39, the age my father died, if you have that, then something like a relevant nutraceutical would be correct. And then, and only these things fail, then resort to medication. As we've seen with this pandemic, the burden, the work burden on our medical system is tremendous, and I'm sure Paul can attest to that. So is this actually something that consumers would want? Well, I think they do. We know the baby boomers are unlike any generation that we've seen before. They're very rebellious and they want to age on their own terms. Half of all Americans over the age of 50 belong to this group of baby boomers. And among them is a highly informed segment actively engaged in managing their healthy aging. There's a consumer belief that nature holds the answer to human health. These individuals, therefore, are reluctant to resort to synthetic drugs if they can help it. And they believe preventative medicine, compounds that work in harmony with the body to achieve health, are the best routes to go. Unfortunately, this belief is not going to be met by the traditional routes to market, which I showed you earlier would be the traditional pharmaceutical markets. These baby boomers do not want to have a permission slip from their doctor in order to try these healthy aging compounds. So what we decided to do was meet the consumer where they were at by building a trustworthy, high quality nutraceutical brand and product. The idea was to take the safe food-derived evidence-backed compound, test it both in Japan and the United States with third-party testing for purity, manufacture it in compliance with very high standards. I would say not exactly pharmaceutical, but very close. All of the manufacturing of our product in Japan and in the United States is done in FDA registered and inspected facilities. They meet the SQF and ISO 22000 food safety standards. We are also using a standardized clinically significant dose. We're very transparent about efficacy and also about the ingredients. We do not use fillers such as talc, which would increase your yield. We're trying to make this as pure as possible because as a former patient myself, I've used up 8 of my 9 lives. I don't really have time to use products that aren't clean. And I think I can confidently say that our product is the cleanest on the market. In the future, I think a cooperative approach similar to what Ishido-san and Yoshimori-sensei are doing in Japan with autophagy Go is the best way to yield benefits to consumers and society. The problem of aging is simply so big that the solution is much, much larger than a single company, certainly bigger than a startup like mine, university, or country. So active collaboration with one another will allow us to continually improve, that famous Japanese saying, Kaizen. We'll be able to do that to both product as well as the price point, bringing this to more individuals and benefiting society in the process. My philosophy is let's do well by doing good, and I sincerely hope that you'll join me.
Thank you so much for that, Leslie. Amazing. So, I mean, I think as it stands, I mean, the Oxford Healthspan is cutting edge from a doctor's perspective. Obviously, you're trying to get these nutraceuticals at an exceptionally high standard in terms of safety, but you're using your own patient journey to say, actually, these are the things that you feel dear to yourself. And I think that really does resonate, because I think as a balance between medications, sort of the drugs in the traditional sense, I think there is a whole market of things in terms of supplement, but in terms of nutritional side of things, nutriomics, I think it's a bit that we're somewhat lacking in terms of as clinicians. Similar question that I asked to Dr. Ishida, but I guess in terms of what are your views in terms of how you want the company to go in the next, say, 5 to 10 years, and how do you think it will play up in terms of the field of medicine? It's a slightly difficult question to answer, but I just think your
let's go back to something that Professor Noble spoke about. This was the NHS. When the NHS was created, the idea was to bring medical care, acute care, to everyone in society and to make medicine more equitable. And unfortunately, over the last 50 years, that's changed to the management of chronic disease. Professor Andrew Scott has done all of this research that has shown, I think, 85% of the medical cost in the United States is used to manage chronic conditions. But what if we put some of the responsibility into the hands of the patients? What if we actually believed in their ability to take better care of themselves? Would that actually help with the job of doctors and the healthcare system? I mean, we've seen even among our politicians, Tom Watson, deputy leader of the Labour Party, went from being very diabetic, obese, to dropping, I think, a ridiculous number of stone. Was it 13 stone? And then eradicating his diabetes in the process, I think that we're beginning to realize that the human body is much more capable of eradicating disease than we think, but we need to give it the proper conditions. And part of the responsibility for that has got to lie with the patient, as it did in my own case. If we can just get the patient to realize that they have the power to bring their body back to homeostasis with diet, with some of these nutraceuticals, which are extremely powerful, but are safe, and in fact, our own body makes them, then we might help to reduce the load on doctors like you.
That's a fantastic answer. I think there's a question early on to one of the speakers, and I think perhaps we can direct that to yourself. It says, I get a lot of questions from people asking, why would they not simply eat an ounce of aged cheddar daily instead of taking a supplement, let's say spermidine, for instance?
Well, Dr. Kaufman might have an answer to this, but I think that there are two issues. One is the histamine load, and both Professor Simon and Dr. Kaufman talked about how great fermented foods are. But for some individuals, and particularly those with leaky gut, having foods like cheese or sauerkraut are going to load you up with too much histamine. Another thing, obviously, with cheese, and you'll know this as a doctor, is cholesterol. So that's the trade-off, right? I'm sure there would be loads of people, especially here in post-Brexit Britain, who are thinking, great, I'm just going to eat a lot of cheddar cheese. But as a doctor, you'll know that if you just had a diet of cheddar cheese, your cardiologist would not be very happy.
Okay, so I think there's a comment saying that, bravo, your approach is laudable. The challenges for nutraceuticals remain making the medical claims, even if there's published research that support it. And that's true. I mean, it's very difficult.
Well, so the opportunity here is with aging. So aging is not considered by the Food and Drug Administration to be a disease. It's true what Phil Mikan says, that we're not allowed to actually talk about disease. However, we can talk about healthy aging. We do know that it helps with things such as sleep. Dr. Kaufman talked about circadian reset. We do know that it helps with immune function, vis-a-vis Professor Simon's work. We do know that it has pleiotropic effects. It's systemic, right? The benefit. So if we simply say that it helps with healthy aging, that's enough. For the time being, anyway. It will take clinicians and citizens, individuals. They do need some education, and frankly, symposium like these are a way to get the message out.
Absolutely, I think this interdisciplinary platform is a starter, and I think that there will be more to come in due course.